We are so excited to be joined by Josh Tubbs today. Josh leads a space planning team at Walmart. Josh was kind enough to kind of walk us through one of their newer initiatives called Item Swap a couple of months ago, and he is here again today to talk about QuickMods, yet another new Walmart initiative. And again, you know, this is kind of newer. We want to make sure that you guys are in the know that it's happening, what it is, what's going on. And again, Josh was kind enough to carve out about an hour of his day today to talk us through the ins and outs of it. So can we all start with a quick round of applause for Josh for being here? All right, Josh. So are we ready to go ahead and kick off the conversation and get that started? Okay. Oh, is it on?
Test. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. So Josh, I'm going to ask kind of a softball question to get us started. What is QuickMods?
Yeah, Allie, so if you want to go to the first slide, I have a visual here to kind of help understand. So I was here a couple months ago to talk about Item Swap. QuickMods, it's just this is what we're calling the natural next evolution of Item Swap. So when you think through Item Swap, I'm going to talk about both of them because we kind of use them in tandem. But Item Swap, we talked about a lot in this forum before, but it's a one-for-one swap. So we took that solution and rolled it out to the business. We've been using it for a year as of a couple weeks ago. We took a lot of merchant feedback along that process, and then we had a lot of questions from merchants. Can I do this? Can I do that? And in most cases, if it wasn't a one-for-one swap, the answer was no, you can't do that. So we went back to the tech team. I'll thank my product leader here, Jay. She's sitting at the table in front, and then my business partner, Jason, who's also here with me. They were instrumental in us developing this solution, but we set out and we said, well, what are some of the simple changes a merchant would like to make to where you can execute changes similar to an item swap, but obviously there's a lot of scenarios where an item swap doesn't work. So I kind of walk through the four major ones and how we see it. So we had a lot of merchants say, well, I have extra facings of an item. There's a multitude of reasons you might be in that camp, whether you over-predicted the demand for an item, so you gave it too many facings, or maybe you gave it enough facings, but your actual supply chain is lacking. Item swaps, we have a lot of scenarios where we can't get any supply, so we swap out a new item. But there's plenty of scenarios where we're on allocation and we can't get enough of an item, but we're still getting some of the item. So in that case, you would say, well, I don't want to delete the item, but I am willing to reduce its facing. So how do I reduce some of the facings and insert a new item next to that item? Another common one is how do I reduce facings but then swap out an item? So the item I'm wanting to bring in is bigger than the item I deleted. So when we talked about item swap, it's generally the same size. Well, the only way to make more room is to either delete two items or delete an item and remove something to make up that space. So how do I insert and bring in something larger? Then we have on the bottom left here, we said, okay, so I have an item I want to swap, but it doesn't make sense in the flow of the planogram in that location. So maybe I am swapping out a premium item and I'm bringing in a value item or vice versa. How do I delete an item but then insert it somewhere else in the planogram where it makes sense for the flow? Limitations on that is we're not going to play the Tetris game of moving things up and down shelves. It needs to be on the continuous shelf because when we say QuickMods, we want it to not only be quick for home office, we want it to be quick for the stores as well.
Right.
So if we put it on a shelf and then you move four things to make that move, eventually it snowballs into, hey, this isn't quick anymore. So you can delete an item, insert an item kind of to the left or to the right on a continuous shelf, not just a 4-foot shelf. You can go all the way up and down your mods if you have a flat profile. And then the last one here in the bottom right, we say this is our least favorite, not from a technical standpoint, but we would prefer to swap out and bring more assortment to the customer. But in cases where we can't, maybe committed buy programs or things like that, how do I delete an item and face out an item to the right or to the left? Maybe the demand was going to transfer to that item, so I need that facing. And that indicates to the store that at least for the foreseeable future, this item is not coming back. And how do I update the labels accordingly? Because different stores would take different measures. They would think they need to remove the label, but then it comes back and then they have to reprint the label. This is like saying, hey, this thing is officially deleted for now.
Okay.
Go ahead and update your modular and face out.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense, Josh. So it sounds like kind of what you're mentioning is item swap was at 1-for-1, had to be on the same size, had to be in the same location, and this is really expanding the capabilities for the merchant teams to kind of swap things out as needed.
Exactly.
So, question for you on cadence of this. So, I'm sure a lot of suppliers in here are like, "Oh boy, talk to me about, will this replace my line reviews? Is this something that's going to, be happening on a monthly basis, or what do you expect, or how have you seen merchants use this so far?"
Yeah, so generally we've seen it doesn't replace what we would call a major mod, or kind of like your full relay.
Okay.
There are scenarios where merchants have had a relay scheduled, and then for whatever reason, maybe there's not a lot of innovation in the pipeline. They shifted their strategy to do a quick mod for now, and we'll do a major relay later. But we foresee this being kind of, we don't have a regular cadence yet, and I can talk about some of the details why. But we would foresee this being like, hey, I have an opportunity to do X, so I then get approval to do a quick mod. You're
Okay.
probably not going to see it more than once a quarter in a category, but in certain scenarios it's possible.
Sure.
Some of the reasoning from a technical standpoint at Walmart is item swap doesn't actually require us as home office associates to check in a new mod. It updates the mod at the store because it's 1-for-1, and if you're familiar with location IDs at Walmart, it's a numerical kind of Dewey Decimal System sort of thing to where it counts the items and it helps pickers find an item.
Right.
Well, when you do 1-for-1, you're deleting a 5 and replacing a 5. It doesn't
Right.
actually affect all the other items. But in all of these cases on the right, we're deleting an item and inserting an item or completely removing it, which changes the count of items after that. So these mods are actually checked into the system as a kind of a regular mod like we would a relay. So that limits us in how often we can do it, just because some details in Walmart systems, I can't just continuously stack up
Right.
major relays.
Right.
The system doesn't view them that way yet.
Okay. Can you talk, Josh, about maybe the store execution piece of this? So who does this belong to? Let's just say the buyer says, yes, we're going to go ahead and update. We're going to do a quick mod, and then kind of what happens from there.
Yep. So item swap is bucketed as we bucket price changes. So we look at item swap like a simple label change. Now, sometimes you have to get inventory out of the back and swap it on the shelf, unlike a price change. But with quick mods, that's actually going down as a modular relay. So that is overnight, or the mod setting labor hours. So we have teams that are devoted to mod setting. And because it is that way, we actually have to also schedule that labor. Price changes don't have specific scheduled labor. It's just a large bucket and people do it all the time. So there are weeks where a quick mod isn't going to be able to happen because maybe Walmart has maxed out their hours that week. It's not too common. Typically, you'll see it at the start of the fiscal year. There's a lot of weeks that are maxed out.
Sure.
But we do have to actually go into what we call M-Track, which is our scheduling system, and say, I got to make sure the stores have availability to set that mod. So there's another limitation to quick mods.
Okay. Do you foresee, are there any blackout periods for quick mods? So I know, for example, Black Friday, Christmas, obviously huge time for Walmart. Are those kind of, hey, we're set and that's what it is? Or is it, whenever?
Yeah, so that, from a modular labor scheduling perspective, we're still going to abide by what we call the blackout, which is essentially event through Christmas.
Okay.
We typically don't send down any mods that we don't have to.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I think maybe the suppliers, Josh, would really understand your insight and thoughts behind kind of the reasoning of quick mods. So obviously, we are going through unprecedented times, TM. And so I'm sure, for a lot of suppliers, we're continuing to see those struggles with supply chain and getting inventory and all of that stuff. What are some of the drivers behind quick mods? What is Walmart's kind of thought behind this new initiative?
Yeah, so that's what started the whole conversation and led into item swap, which led into quick mods, was the supply chain issues with COVID. And I need to update a mod, but it takes a lot of labor and time from home office and a ton of planning to update a modular. But at this point, obviously, there's still some supply chain issues.
Right.
But from a strategy side, we actually want to get in the camp of, how do we spot opportunities to grow sales, and how do we take that initiative to say, hey, this is doing well in the market, or this innovation is coming. I typically would have waited 4 or 5 months till my major relay to execute it. Why not execute it now? Or I just released a mod a few months ago. I analyzed the mod. I know what's doing well. How do I expand on what's doing well and cut back on what didn't work? So we want to get out of the cadence of kind of set it and forget it, and like actually be able to be nimble and modify our assortment. I call it on the fly. That's what so we want to think about our side counter more like a website. Like, how do we change it when we see demand change?
Oh, that's a really interesting perspective on that, because I mean, on Walmart.com, you can swap pictures out, you can swap items out on an as-needed basis. So kind of trying to bring that into the stores as well.
Exactly.
So I've got a question, Josh. You kind of alluded to it earlier in the conversation. You mentioned that, you know, in a couple of weeks, have been about a year since this has been rolled out. I've assumed this is probably a little bit newer to some of the suppliers in the room. So I guess it's actively happening. Is it across the box? Are you guys trying it with a certain kind of BU first, or what does that rollout look like?
Yeah, so the 1 year anniversary is for item swap. QuickMod is brand new.
Okay.
As far as merchants communication and the training has been done over the last couple months, but the actual merchant communication just went out 2 weeks ago. So unlike item swap, which is I just synchronized with y'all when y'all had an event, it had been running for a while. QuickMods, like I said, it's brand new. We have done tests in pretty much every SBU, with the exception of maybe apparel, because they don't operate all the same. I mean, we still can do apparel, but we just haven't. Some of the limitations might limit some categories. So if you're in beauty in here, unfortunately, we can't always adjust white wall just because the fixtures are so unique and they don't operate the same. But if it's on standard shelves or pegs, and we say standard shelf, it doesn't have to be a normal gondola, but anything that's normal like a shelf or a peg, we can handle it. So we've done north of 30 tests already. So yeah, there's quite a few out there. I mean, they wouldn't have looked any different to the stores per se. Like at first they just went down as mods.
Okay. No,
but we were using our system in the background to execute these.
Okay, that's super helpful. So I'm curious then, Josh, that, you know, this is obviously kind of like you mentioned, a newer initiative. Buyers are probably being introduced to this as well. As far as getting QuickMods, you know, maybe shown to a buyer or recommended to a buyer, how would a supplier go about doing that? Or does this come only from the buyer?
So there are modular development associates in the box who are using it, but it's a buyer-led initiative.
Okay.
So some of the details, it doesn't have to go outside the Walmart firewall and go to an advisor to draw and then come back in and have to be checked in. It's actually a UI that the merchants have to execute these common changes.
Right.
And they can do more than one at one time. It's not like you can only do one of these. So you could set up, you know, a couple of these scenarios at a time and do it. But a merchant does start the process of the communication between the teams. Like, hey, this is what I want to do. I got to get approval, put it in an M track on a given week, and then go into the system and execute the change. But kind of optically as a supplier, it wouldn't look any different than a regular mod.
Okay.
So it'll get checked into the system. GRS will, if you're on GRS, it will generate your orders. It'll automatically create markdowns for the old deletes. And just as if we're doing a new mod, it's just removing a ton of the friction that was required to do it before. So we typically never did it before because of the amount of effort.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned the word markdown. I saw every supplier's ears perk up in the room immediately. Can you talk through what the markdown expectations are? You did mention it's going to be very similar to a mod. And I'm sure, you know, as we all know here, your mileage may vary depending on the program, depending on the buyer that you're working with. But generally speaking, is this going to be a situation where suppliers now have to start thinking about markdown, you know, keeping some markdown dollars safe somewhere, or how do you anticipate this will affect them?
From a markdown perspective, I don't see it being any different than a major mod, with exception maybe in the scenario where you are introducing an idea or you're proposing a change that wasn't a scheduled change. And in order to execute that change, there's obviously a cost associated with Walmart. Despite it being fast, it still requires effort. We still have to have teams do it. We are, in theory, generating a delete that we might not have done before.
Right.
And we're spending labor hours at the store to go out and make that change. It's not as easy as a one-for-one, because like I said, once you change one label, I have to change some of the labels
Right.
to update my location IDs. I would probably assume that at some point there's going to be more of a markdown ask if it's the initiative that you're creating, but I don't think it's going to be that different from normal. So
Okay.
I know different areas operate differently.
Right.
So like you said, mileage may vary, but it's not some has to be this way or can't be another way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. One thing, Josh, that you mentioned, this being kind of a buyer-led initiative with item swap. So we learned that suppliers can also make recommendations to their buyers. Hey, we have a new flavor or a new style that's doing really great on Walmart.com. Let's go ahead and swap it out. Can suppliers make these similar recommendations for QuickMods as well, or is it just sit tight and wait for your buyer to reach out to you?
I think you could reach out to your buyer and if you have a proposal, and that's part of the reason I'm here, just so everybody understands like what it means when we say QuickMod and
Right.
not, hey, it's something I heard about. I don't know what that means. Like, can I move a shelf to fit this larger item in? No, we're not
Like,
moving
no.
shelves. Like, it's just
But
that
why?
way you understand how it works and your proposal makes sense within the confines of what a merchant can actually do.
Right. No, I think we very much appreciate just again being able to hear it kind of directly from the source. It's extremely helpful. So from the supplier's perspective, from an execution perspective, let's just say the buyer is like, hey, we're going to execute this QuickMods, we're going to delete this item, add this item. What does that process look like for a supplier? Is it still flowing through Item 360? Are there different templates or apps in Retail Link that suppliers should be aware of?
Templates are no different. Apps are
Okay.
no different. It's an app that the merchant uses or someone on their support team uses to create their modular, which is not normal for them, but from a systemic point of view and a supplier lens, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
You still need to have your items created before you go into that process. Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Okay. And I assume the expectations for Walmart.com are going to be the same as well. I know, Walmart has a huge Omni push. So if you have a new item being added to QuickMods, you're still expected to have it on Walmart.com and all of that good
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, barring any sort of limitations to where it can't be sold online or whatever the case may be, yes, it'll be the same as a normal item.
Okay. So I'm going to put you on the hot seat just a little bit, Josh. Do you foresee any challenges for suppliers as this initiative rolls out through the box? And maybe we can talk through after that some best practices for them to be aware of and kind of, again, get ahead of what's coming down the pipe.
I know one challenge for suppliers is the concept of item swap and QuickMods. It's definitely a double-edged sword. So when we talked about set it and forget it, that was a term I think you used in one of our pre-meetings. I liked it. It's not set it and forget it for both sides of the fence. So not only are merchants setting it and then a year later are going to go back and touch it, like just because you got your PODs on the mod doesn't mean you get to keep your PODs on the mod. So the quick mods, just like item swaps, don't have to be vendor-specific swaps. That means you can get more PODs or you can get less PODs at any given time, so to speak.
Not terrifying at all,
yeah.
Josh.
I think it probably just, keeps you on your toes a little more, and you understand, like, maybe in the past there was some leniency when it comes to short supply. Now merchants have the ability to kind of rapidly iterate and
Right.
because we're here for the customer, and the customer doesn't want holes on their mod. They want the newest items on their mod. They don't want to. The customer doesn't care what our modular relay schedule is. They're not like, I got to wait till spring for that new brand to come
No,
out.
you're so right.
Well, they could just go to Target if Target had the brand or whatever
so
the
right.
case may be. So, why can't we be first on brand
Right.
launches as well?
No, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of just best practices, would you say, I mean, obviously we all know kind of table stakes is be on top of your supply chain, understand your inventory and all that good stuff. But now it seems like we even have to lean even further into things like trend, just being aware of, again, what's new on the market and making sure that you're bringing it to Walmart first. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's some scenarios where you've been working with your merchant and there's a major relay coming up. we'll just say 3 months from now, probably not worth the effort to pressure a merchant to do a quick mod because they're in the process of building that major mod 3 months from now. They're probably not going to do a quick mod. You probably want to synchronize your innovation pipeline with the major relay, but I know there's scenarios where that doesn't happen, and we're trying to develop pathways to make us more nimble.
Okay. So one question that I have for you, Josh. So when we spoke at the item swap event, we had mentioned that this can, go down to store level. So you can like find 5 stores and do an item swap in those 5 stores and you're good to go. With QuickMods, are you able, speaking of points of distribution, are buyers able to kind of do a quick mod at store, down to store level, or is it clusters of stores, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so QuickMod is what we call planogram specific. So it is not store item specific. Item swap still exists and we still can do that. We don't have that capability with QuickMods yet. In the spirit of agile methodology, we have a system that we can release to merchants and we have value now. So we're releasing this now. Do I see that as a capability in the future? Probably. We're just not there yet. So they can update one or all modulars or any combination of modulars, but essentially if there's 100 stores on one mod, those 100 stores will get the update. We're not going to what we call retrait. So we're not going to create a new group of mods to send down to stores. So it's mod specific.
Okay.
And in some cases that is store specific.
Right, yeah.
But in most cases it's not.
Okay, no, that's super helpful. So I've got a quick question, Josh, for you on the, so we mentioned obviously these are for anything that can be on a regular shelf, a regular peg. Could you talk through, does this initiative apply if, let's say, you have a non-modular item, so let's just say a seasonal item, maybe the front pad, or you are on, probably not clip strips, but let's just go ahead and take it to that edge case and see where it goes.
There is modularized clip strips. Regular clip strips, no, it won't apply to clip strips. This actually works better for those cases. Item swap doesn't work in 100% of cases because what we call type 3 or the seasonal items are kind of manually ordered. So GRS doesn't, when we do item swaps, it doesn't see the validity shifts. I know I'm going kind of deep into the weeds here, but it actually works better for those cases. We can send down a seasonal update, assuming we have, the inventory in the pipeline or the ability to get that inventory. One caveat I would say that makes it a little tough for seasonal is how far out they check in their mods. So like I said, we can't stack up multiple mods. So the Christmas mods are done pretty far out. So you kind of would have to wait until the season starts to then update the Christmas season, and then you're in the middle of Christmas and we're probably not going to update mods. So it's a little tricky, but yeah, we can update those mods if we need to.
Okay. That's really helpful, Josh. And as far as timeline goes, so for, let's just say again, the buyer says, yes, we're going to go ahead and execute this. What does that, you mentioned it's a lot quicker than kind of the standard modular relay. What is that timeline, just give or take?
Yeah, so when you think through the standard relay, it varies across the box. Generally, we say it's about 40 weeks. There's prep work, there's line reviews, there's drawing, there's proofing, there's redrawing after proofing, checking in. Like it's a long, slow process. The QuickMods process needs to be at least as long as the supply chain lead time. So you should never make it shorter than that, or you're just risking, doing changes and not having any inventory at the stores when you get there. But you're probably looking in the 7 to 10 week window, I would say, is kind of
that's
a normal
quick
range. QuickMods, just in a conversation yesterday, we're probably leaning more towards the 4 to 5 week window there for the similar reason, but there's just less upstream planning and work required for an item swap than a QuickMod. And QuickMod requires labor at the store, so that can make the weeks vary based on what weeks we have available hours.
Sure. And again, I'm going to speak for our supplier pals here and ask, so for items that are going to be involved in QuickMods, new ads and things like that with such that, a really compressed timeline, are these items still going to be subject to things like OTIF fines, SQEP fines? If you're the collect pickup program, will it just kind of be business as usual? Are there exceptions for a certain amount of time, or what does that look like?
We haven't had any conversations around exceptions in that. Like I said, it's a regular mod that gets checked in from a external perspective. So as far as I'm aware, everything would operate under normal
Okay.
scenarios.
You heard it here first, guys. Get your inventory ready.
But I mean, definitely have conversations with your merchant. Like I said, there could be scenarios where they want to execute a mod in 7 weeks, and you say, "Well, I can't get it to you in
Right.
10." So have that conversation so
Sure.
you don't create the scenario where you need to fight the fine
Have the
anyway.
conversation. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So you mentioned, Josh, that, for right now, merchants should be fully aware, fully trained on it. But, as we know, Walmart is huge and a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts. If suppliers, let's just say, have additional questions about QuickMods, is the buyer kind of the first line of defense to talk to? Is there a team they should be reaching out to internally? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so the internal business support team is pretty small. It's me and Jason.
We will not be sharing their email addresses. Don't ask us.
Good and bad. Jason just got promoted on my team, so I'll have to find a new Jason. But yeah, so give it up for Jason. There's the QuickMods email. I would say that's where your merchant should go if they have questions about QuickMod that they can't answer in the training documentation that we have. I guess technically suppliers could email that. I can't guarantee we would even necessarily get to it or be fast to reply because we're prioritizing merchant questions
Sure.
and rolling out the tool. It's not like we have a large support team just devoted to supplier level questions. The first line of defense is the reason I'm here. So that exists. I would send your merchant there.
Okay.
But we've been to every departmental DMM meeting and done a training.
Mm-hmm.
We have training documentation for them, but people are on PTO. People have
Sure.
started since we've
Yeah,
done the
it's
training.
life, yeah.
We have brand new people. So
Yeah.
I would say there's never a scenario where everyone knows everything about every tool. So,
Okay.
the
Definitely.
more cross-pollination of knowledge we can get, the better.
Definitely. So let me see if I have any follow-up questions on that. Oh, looks like we've got some questions coming. And friendly reminder to you guys, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to use the question cards and just lift up your hands, and we have folks that will come around and pick them up. So quick question on that, Josh. I just remembered my question. It's very early on Tuesday morning. So as far as documentation training goes, I know Retail Link has the Academy, which is a pretty great resource. Are there any resources for training or documentation for QuickMods yet on Academy? Is that something that's coming? If not?
There's not, but we've had conversations, and we will probably strive to put information out there. We haven't typically rolled out tools and done kind of external training in this way, but I think it was pretty successful for Item Swap, and that's why we're here early on with QuickMods. So we'll look to get some of this out there, and then you can put the slide that I have today on SupplierWiki, and then we'll go from there.
We're going to get through these quickly. We've got, I think, we've got about 15 minutes, and Josh and Jason and his team are going to be around for about 15 minutes afterwards too. So don't harass them, approach them nicely, ply them with coffee, and they will be able to answer the questions if we don't get to them in time. Okay, so first question, here's a good one. Is there a minimum number of changes that have to be made before a QuickMod becomes a choice? Are there any thresholds to that, or can it be kind of 1 item to 2 items, kind of what you showed?
It could definitely be 1 item to 2 items. There is a limitation. At some point, we would consider it a major relay. So the general thought we have there is the changes should take less than 30 minutes at a store level.
Okay, very helpful.
We don't have an exact number
Sure.
as to how many swaps that is, but that's the lens we're asking merchants and the judgment for them to use. Will we get to a point where we can quantify how many changes equal 30 minutes? Probably, but depending on what you do, a delete and face is easier than a delete and add somewhere else because I got to move items, and depends on how many labels I got to change. But you're probably looking somewhere between 1 and a dozen, probably, if I had to come up with a number off the top of my head.
Okay, no, that's really helpful, and the perfect segue for the next question, which is there kind of a max number of changes, before your buyer goes, this, let's just wait till the, full mod relay. So 30 minutes sounds to be kind of the unofficial-ish threshold.
Yeah, that's the unofficial-ish threshold. There's always exceptions to every rule at Walmart. You could go out there and you could schedule more labor hours. You could put 2 hours of labor in the system if we had that available and do more QuickMods. But the general rule we're going with is under 30 minutes.
Okay.
Because we don't want the stores having to,
Sure.
it costs a lot every time we send down one.
And, in the name, quick. So,
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a good question as far as costs go. So as you mentioned, obviously there is a labor component to it. Will this, and potentially you're going to have to shift things around. Will this ever cost the suppliers anything kind of outside of obviously the inventory and potentially markdown support? But will they have to pay for the labor or pay for additional space or anything like that?
Will this ever is a tricky phrase. I can't say forever.
Okay.
Currently, it's operating on a normal mod.
Okay.
We are currently not charging anybody for that labor.
Fair enough, yeah.
There's scenarios where our mods are vendor set. They can still be vendor set if that's how your category works, like maybe Hallmark or whatever the case may be. There's different scenarios. But, yeah, at this point, no. At some point in the future, who knows?
Maybe. Yeah, for sure. No,
I would say,
that's super helpful.
I haven't had those conversations, so I wouldn't be too concerned with that right around the corner, but.
Okay. No, that's really helpful, Josh. So here's a good question. Can you kind of talk through which categories you've seen have had the most success for QuickMods? So are there any categories that kind of lean themselves, make sense for QuickMods and vice versa? Any categories where you're like, this probably doesn't really make sense for this particular category?
We had some conversations. So we've done a couple store-specific categories. We didn't do all stores. We did like 1,600 stores in chicken, and then we did another large thing in milk. An item couldn't make it to the mod, so once we realized that, we did a quick mod and deleted it and phased out everything else. It makes sense for almost all of grocery consumables and anything that's all shelves. Like, it's super easy. Like that sort of scenario is very flexible. There are scenarios as you go into some of the like hardware and that, you'll start to see some unique fixtures designed to hold unique shaped items. Gets a little tricky there. But in general, it works for the overwhelming majority of the box. It's gone pretty well.
Okay. No, that's really helpful. Are there examples that you can share, Josh, anonymized of categories, and just a sample of like, hey, we did this, it went really well, and obviously the customers are happy, sales went up, and things like that, just to put our suppliers at ease that this is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I know in some of the examples we haven't been doing it, to delete something. We've been doing it in a lot of cases to reduce the facing, and in a couple different scenarios, bring something back. So there's a couple scenarios where we got rid of a price point, but then, like I said, the modular process is 40 weeks long. So 40 weeks ago, somebody planned something to go away. I'm going to remove the $5 thing. I think people will trade up to the $8 thing. I'm just making an example here. Well, in the last 40 weeks, there's been a lot of inflation and price increases.
Sure.
So the $8 thing is now a $15 thing.
Sure.
So they've had to bring back a lower price point item to give the customer, the
choices,
ability to only spend $7 or $8.
Yeah.
Because that's all they have.
Yeah.
So we've seen that on a couple occasions. Occasions where it didn't work, not as in it failed, but we had some mods where there's not a consistent flow from one to the other. Like, if you were to look at one store, it's generally the same, but there's a ton of different adjacencies, and sometimes that can make quick mods confusing because like they're saying, well, I want to delete this item and face out this item. Well, that scenario only exists in 40 stores.
Right.
And another 40 stores is a different item you're expanding. We can expand all different items, but the concept of, hey, I want to delete this and expand this might not always come to fruition because there's no guarantee that those two things are always adjacent.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So this is a good question from a tactical standpoint. So as you're changing items out, do you do any sort of linking on the back end for items that you're replacing? So is there any sort of cross-referencing, or is it a true kind of delete add?
Yeah, so it would operate just like a regular mod. If you're doing a cross-reference, You wouldn't actually need a modular, so you wouldn't need a delete because the cross-reference is kind of saying that they are cross-referenced together and you shouldn't delete the old inventory. I don't foresee a scenario where there's any linkage. Item swap, we talked about last time, has some linkage with CID where we instruct the associate to not remove the old inventory because we're kind of creating that linkage and we're saying we're flowing in a new thing. But in QuickMods, no, it's normal.
Okay. So another more tactical question. So let's just say, again, a supplier is selected to be part of the QuickMods. They're going to get an item deleted. How much lead time are they given to kind of plan down that inventory for that deleted item? So we're obviously, like you mentioned, it's kind of regular mod. There's going to be a little bit of that plan down, but again, just how many, hey, you've got 8 weeks and you got to clear out the inventory, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so we've been having conversations with merchants around what should your QuickMods timing be, because that should, in theory, also be something the merchant is taking into account. If you have 50 weeks of supply and you're wanting to delete it, that might not be the right idea.
Right.
Because that's obviously going to generate a lot of markdown dollars and a lot of excess inventory at the store that doesn't have a modular home. There's no general rule of thumb as to how long they're going to give you, but probably 7 to 10 weeks is at least what they're going to give you. We haven't seen a whole lot of people executing shorter than that. And if they did, it was a scenario where all parties were involved and they knew what was going on. And like I said, when you're doing the reduce and add, there's not a delete there.
Right.
So we aren't taking markdowns if we're reducing facings. The stores will just work through. Maybe that inventory moves up to top stock and comes back down, but only in the case of a delete is where a markdown is a concern. So there's no official timing though.
Okay, no, that's really helpful, Josh. So I think we talked about this a little bit earlier on, but maybe good to kind of reiterate for everybody here. So we know shelves can't be moved up or down, but on QuickMods, it can only be executed within the same shelf or kind of peg row. Is that correct? So we can't move, one from down here to up there.
Correct. We have. It's not like not only are we telling them they can't do that, like we have no ability in the current system we developed to do that. So the only way for a merchant to do a delete and move around is to schedule a relay.
Okay.
And just because you believe those changes will be made in 30 minutes, that doesn't make it a quick mod. That makes it a regular relay for us, but more time. So it might only take 30 minutes for the stores, but it takes days or weeks and tons of hours on our side to check out the mods, send them to the advisor, articulate the strategy, make sure everything is drawn correctly, checked. Like it's a whole lot of additional effort. So not saying that those kind of small change mods can happen, but they're much less likely to happen, and they definitely won't be considered a quick mod.
Okay. Very fair. Okay, so here's a good one. Can the store matrix be provided sooner in relation to the first purchase orders than in the traditional modular timeline? So let's just say a supplier is selected for a quick mod. How quickly do you get that store list? How fast can you know how you're going to execute on it, basically?
So unfortunately, I think the answer is probably going to be even shorter time frame than you're normally used to, because you're normally getting your store matrix at about the same length of time the whole QuickMods process takes.
Okay.
It definitely will not come any earlier than we're actually executing the change. So when a merchant goes to execute a QuickMod, you're looking at, I don't know, anywhere from a day to 3 days for kind of all the people to talk and kind of execute the change and officially lock it into the system. So at that point, we could generate a matrix because the mod is checked in and finalized, but it's almost the same amount of lead time. There's going to be not a lot of difference there,
Okay. Really, really helpful.
I would say have the conversation with the merchant and figure out what your strategy is on the front end and make sure that, if there's a scenario where you need it to be a certain way, you have that conversation, but the official store alignment won't be generated until the mods are finalized, just like they are today.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. So we are down to 1 minute. We've got 2 questions left, so we'll get through these really fast, and then I will release Josh to the masses, and you guys can can crowd around him after this. So here's a really interesting one. So for DC items, so slotted items, how are those taken into consideration during deletes, for example? Do you guys take a look at what is still left at the DC from an on-hands perspective when you're saying, hey, this item is going to go, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's the same, I know it sounds like a broken record, it's the same cadence as a normal mod. The merchant needs to take into account that DC slotting. A lot of those mods are DC specific, so when we think through it's mod specific, we're not partially generating a delete in a DC more than likely. So we can take that out of the slot, but the merchants and the RMs or replenishment managers are aware of the changes and then sometimes have to push out the inventory from the DC so we don't have any trapped inventory in the DC. But I would say it's business as usual for those teams who are used to operating in that window.
Sure. So I would say for suppliers too, just make sure you understand what your inventory levels are when that happens, so you can work with the RMs and help push that inventory out if needed.
Yeah, so when we think through markdown risk and inventory liability, it's not just what's in stores, it's what's in the pipeline.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so last question for you. So if the mods aren't checked in, what mod is the start mod for the relay?
So currently, and we're working to improve this in the future, currently the start mod is the mod that is in stores.
Okay.
So we can't stack up multiple relays, and I can't currently create my starting point as a mod that hasn't actualized in the store yet. I believe we can get to that point. I have no concrete timeline on that, but we've definitely had those conversations, and we want to get to a point where, okay, I know I have a mod coming in 6 weeks, but I know I need to make a change to it already. How can I use that as my starting point with another effective date 7 weeks from then? We see that as a future enhancement. We're just not there yet.
Okay, no, that's super helpful. Well, you guys, that's all the questions I have. We got through them. Amazing. Can we give Josh a big round of applause, please? Thank you for his time.